Every legend hides a truth. Every myth whispers a warning. Welcome to the Mythic Hour, where the forgotten gods and cursed stories return to life. The battlefield was not yet silent, though the cries of dying men had begun to thin. Smoke curled from the broken timbers of wagons and the charred grass where torches had swept. A red dawn stretched across the sky as if the heavens themselves had been wounded. And there, on the edge of the carnage, the crows had gathered. No ordinary crows. They came in unnatural numbers, black wings blotting the sun, their voices harsh and eager. The warriors who still breathed dared not drive them away, for all knew what their presence meant. They were the heralds of one who walked between life and death, one who thrived where blood flowed, the Morrígan, the Phantom Queen. She appeared not as a goddess of distant, shining light, but as a presence woven into fear itself. Some said she was a tall woman with hair as black as the raven's wing, her eyes pools of endless night. Others swore they had seen her as a hag, cloaked in rags, washing blood-stained armor at the riverbank, a prophecy of a warrior's death. And still others told that she could take the form of a crow itself, circling above the doomed. But on this morning, the survivors saw her walking the field. Her feet did not seem to touch the earth. Her pale skin glimmered in the broken dawn, though shadows clung to her like armor. The crows landed in her wake, watching with intelligent, gleaming eyes. She moved among the fallen, her fingers trailing across a dying warrior's face. His breath rattled once, then ceased, as though she had drawn the last spark from his chest. A trembling youth, wounded but alive, dared whisper, "Phantom Queen, will you spare me?" Her gaze fell upon him, and it was like staring into the abyss between worlds. She smiled, not with mercy, but with terrible amusement. "Spare you?" Her voice was like wind through a graveyard, low and echoing. "If you live, it is not my mercy but my design. If you die, it is not cruelty, but destiny." And with that she left him to his pain. For the Morrígan was no goddess of fairness, nor of kindness. She was the embodiment of fate as it entwined with blood and war. She did not simply watch battles, she fed on them, shaped them, thrived in them. To some, she was terror itself. To others, she was the voice of prophecy, the one who warned of the storms to come. Legends say that when the Phantom Queen appeared, kings faltered and warriors quaked. For her presence meant not just death, but the unraveling of destinies. That morning, as the carrion birds shrieked and tore at flesh, she lifted her face to the dawn. Her lips moved, whispering words not meant for mortal ears. A prophecy of more blood. A foretelling that this battle was but a spark to a greater blaze that would sweep across Ireland. The Morrígan smiled, her teeth sharp in the half-light. And with a beat of wings, she was gone, vanishing into the swarm of crows that erupted into the sky, leaving only terror and the certainty of doom behind. But this was only the beginning. For the Phantom Queen's story stretches across the great wars of Ireland, tangled with heroes, kings, and prophecies of ruin. And those who thought to defy her would learn that one cannot escape fate, especially when fate wears the face of a raven. The Morrígan was never just one. To the druids and poets who spoke of her in hushed tones, she was a trinity, three goddesses bound together as one terrible force. She was Bab, the crow, whose cries carried the madness of battle into the minds of men. She was Macha, the fury, swift and merciless, who embodied sovereignty and vengeance. And she was Nemain, the frenzy, whose screams alone could shatter courage and drive armies into chaos. Together, they formed the Phantom Queen, a being both singular and infinite. One face might appear as a seductress, luring a warrior to his doom, another as an old crone, foretelling a king's downfall, another as a crow perched on a corpse, feeding on the eyes of the dead. She was beauty and terror, promise and despair. To encounter her was to confront the inevitability of death itself. Shape-shifting was her greatest weapon, for it allowed her to weave herself into every stage of war. At dawn she might appear as a maiden, her hair glinting like strands of midnight, whispering to a champion that glory awaited him. By midday she was a raven circling the sky, cawing a warning no one wished to hear. At dusk she was a washerwoman at the ford, scrubbing blood from armor that had not yet been shed, murmuring names of those who would not see another sunrise. One such tale tells of a warrior who came across a bent hag at a riverbank. Her skin was wrinkled, her eyes hollow, and her rags were soaked with gore. She washed and washed, muttering softly. "Old woman," he demanded, "whose armor do you scrub so furiously?" Without looking up, she replied, "Yours." When he peered closer, he saw that it was indeed his own shield and tunic she held in her skeletal hands, the water red as fresh blood. He fled, but not far enough. Days later, he fell in battle, his lifeblood spilling as the hag had foretold. It was in these forms that the Morrigan thrived, not merely as a goddess who watched death, but as one who promised it, delivered it, and consumed it. The Morrigan's prophecies were feared as much as her presence. She was no idle oracle, no gentle voice of warning. Her visions were carved into the bones of fate. She spoke in riddles and songs, weaving doom into poetry that lingered long after the words had ended. Some kings sought her counsel, though few were prepared for her answers. To a rising chieftain, she might say, "You shall hold the crown, but your sons shall bathe in each other's blood." To another, "You will die with glory, but your name shall bring ruin upon your clan." She gave no path of escape, for there was none. The Morrigan did not guide mortals to avoid their fate. She reminded them of the futility of running from it. Yet, despite her terror, the Morrigan was desired. Warriors spoke of her dark beauty, her voice that could enchant even as it cursed. Some longed to claim her favor, believing that to be loved by the Phantom Queen was to be invincible. But her love was as dangerous as her hate. She might offer her embrace to a hero and then, when spurned or betrayed, ensure his downfall with relentless vengeance. She was not bound by mortal notions of loyalty or affection. Her love was the storm, fleeting yet destructive, and always ending in ruin. For the Morrigan was not merely a goddess of war. She was war itself, its chaos, its cruelty, its inevitability. And through her many faces, she ruled every shadow of the battlefield. But her story did not end with omens and shape-shifting. It was in the great wars of Ireland that she revealed her true power, when gods themselves marched to battle, and the Morrigan flew among them, guiding death with every beat of her wings. Long before mortal kings raised their banners, before heroes like Cuchulainn carved their names into memory, Ireland was a land of gods and tribes locked in endless conflict. And among them, none thrived in war's shadow more than the Morrigan. When the Tuatha Dé Danann, the tribe of gods, came to Ireland, they found themselves challenged by the Firbolg, the ancient people of the land. It was in these battles, the first battle of Mag Tuired, that the Phantom Queen revealed her might. The Tuatha Dé Danann prepared for war, their druids weaving spells of fire and storm, their warriors sharpening blades of otherworldly bronze. But the Morrigan did not busy herself with weapons. Her power was not in steel but in terror. On the eve of battle, she walked the camps, her presence heavy as the scent of blood. She whispered into the ears of the Tuatha warriors, stoking their rage, promising them glory if they bled without fear. And across the valley, she drifted into the dreams of the Firbolg, planting visions of doom, ravens tearing at their flesh, rivers of blood drowning their kin. By dawn, both armies knew she was with them. And that meant death was certain. When the horns sounded and the armies clashed, the Morrigan did not remain at the edge. She was in the heart of it, shifting form as the tide demanded. One moment she was a crow, shrieking from above, her cry piercing the hearts of the Firbolg, who stumbled in terror. The next, she was a red-haired maiden standing beside the Tuatha champion Nuada, filling him with strength as his blade carved through foes. Then again, she was the hag of nightmares, screaming into the ears of the Firbolg until they fled, their minds undone by madness. Blood soaked the fields, and the Morrigan reveled in it. She drank of the chaos like wine. Where she passed, courage crumbled, or fury ignited beyond reason. She was the balance and the unbalance, the storm and the silence after it. When at last the Tuatha claimed victory, the warriors swore it was the Morrigan's hand that had tipped the scale. She had not merely witnessed the battle, she had decided it. But victory bred new conflict. For though the Firbolg were scattered, darker foes came. The Fomorians, monstrous beings of the sea, embodiments of destruction and chaos. They were giants and demons, wielders of storm and poison. Even the gods of the Tuatha feared them, for the Fomorians threatened not only land and people, but the very balance of the world. And yet the Morrigan smiled. For the greater the destruction, the richer her harvest. In the second battle of Mag Twyard, the Tuatha Dé Danann faced the Fomorian horde, led by the monstrous King Baelor of the Evil Eye. The battle raged with sorcery and blood, thunder splitting the skies, the ground trembling with the steps of giants. But over it all, the Morrigan's presence loomed. She flew above as a crow, her wings spreading like a storm cloud, her cry carrying over the chaos. And then, when the Tuatha faltered, she unleashed her voice. It was not a song of beauty, but of frenzy. Her scream split the battlefield, a sound so shrill and piercing that the Fomorian ranks broke, many fleeing in blind panic. Warriors clawed at their ears, their minds undone, striking friend and foe alike. Nuada fell that day, but the Tuatha claimed victory. And as Baelor lay dead, struck by the hand of his grandson Luff, the Morrigan appeared on the battlefield. Her feet were red with blood, her eyes wild with triumph. She cried out a prophecy that echoed across the plains. Victory and ruin are one. Blood will drown the rivers, and the land will never be free of war. The Tuatha had won, but they knew her words were truth. Even gods could not escape the endless turning of the war wheel. And where it turned, the Morrigan would always stand, smiling through the carnage. The Phantom Queen's legend grew with every battle. She was not just a goddess of death, she was a weapon of war itself, wielded by fate, feared by gods as much as men. But her tale was far from over. For her most infamous encounter was not with gods, but with a single mortal hero, the one warrior bold enough to spurn her love and cursed forever by her wrath. Among all the warriors of Ireland, none shone brighter, or burned out faster, than Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster. His strength was unmatched, his ferocity feared, and his name was sung in every hall. He was a champion whose feats became legend. And it was he who drew the attention of the Phantom Queen. On the eve of one of his great battles, as Cuchulainn stood alone sharpening his spear, a woman approached him. She was tall, raven-haired, her beauty striking yet edged with something dark. Her eyes glimmered like black pools, ancient and knowing. "Warrior," she said, her voice low, "I come to offer you my love, and with it, my protection. Take me as your companion, and no battle shall defeat you." Cuchulainn looked at her, suspicion in his keen eyes. "And who are you, to make such promises?" "I am the Morrigan," she whispered, and the very air seemed to shudder at her name. "Phantom Queen, goddess of war. With me, you shall be invincible." But Cuchulainn, bold and unyielding, laughed. "I have no need of a goddess's love. My strength is my own. If death comes for me, I will meet it with a smile." The Morrigan's eyes narrowed. For to spurn her was no small insult. It was to spit in the face of fate itself. "You have chosen pride over power," she said coldly. "Then I will stand against you, and you shall fall." With that, she vanished like a shadow in the dusk. When the battle began, Cuchulainn fought like a storm unleashed. Enemies fell before him in heaps, their cries drowned in the clash of steel. But the Morrigan had not forgotten his rejection. She came against him in disguise, not once but 3 times, each time seeking to break him. First, she appeared as a great eel, coiling around his legs as he fought in the river. He stumbled, nearly dragged beneath the current, but with a cry of rage he struck the eel with his spear, wounding it. Next, she came as a wolf, fierce and snarling, scattering cattle in her path to drive them against him. But Cuchulainn hurled a stone, striking the beast in the eye, and she fled howling. Finally, she came as a red cow, charging him with the fury of a stampede. But again he stood firm, driving his spear into her flank. Wounded in every form, the Morrigan retreated, her vengeance delayed but not forgotten. Days later, after the battle's fury had ended, Cuchulainn came to a riverbank to drink. There sat an old woman, blind and bent, milking a cow. She offered him a cup of milk. Weary, he drank it gratefully. "Blessings on you, old mother," he said. The hag smiled with broken teeth. "And blessings on you, Cuchulainn, for now you have healed the wounds you gave me." In that moment he realized the truth. This was the Morrigan herself, the eel, the wolf, the cow he had struck. She had tricked him into healing her. And though she had failed to destroy him, she had bound herself tighter into his fate. Time passed, and Cuchulainn's legend only grew. But fate, once entangled with the Morrigan, could not be undone. One night he saw her again, this time in her most terrible form. A hag at the ford, washing blood from armor in the river, singing softly. He looked closer and his heart turned to ice. The armor she washed was his own. "Why do you wash those garments, old woman?" he demanded. "Because tomorrow, Hound of Ulster," she replied, her voice like the caw of a crow, "you will lie in them, dead." Though he raged and swore to defy her prophecy, deep within he knew it was true. For no man, no matter how strong, escapes the Phantom Queen's song. And when his final battle came, it was the Morrigan who hovered above him in the form of a crow, watching, waiting. She did not strike him down. She did not need to. She had already set the path long ago, when he spurned her love. As Cuchulainn bound himself to a standing stone, refusing to fall even in death, the Morrigan's crow perched upon his shoulder. And with that, all New Ireland's greatest hero was gone. Cuchulainn's tale was sung for centuries, but always with a shadow. For behind his glory stood the Phantom Queen, lover, enemy, prophet, and executioner. Through him, she showed that no man, no hero, no legend could deny her will. And yet, the Morrigan story did not end with him. For there were still kings to curse, battles to guide, and prophecies to sing, each one darker than the last. If the Morrigan thrived on blood, she feasted on prophecy. For her greatest power was not in claw or spear, but in her voice, the voice that could shape fate itself. Her words were never gentle. They were as sharp as swords, heavy as funeral bells. To kings, druids, and warriors, she brought visions of their end, not to warn them, but to remind them that doom was already written. There was once a high king who sought to unite Ireland under his rule. Proud and ambitious, he sent for the Morrigan, demanding her blessing. She came to him as a maiden, her hair dark as storm clouds, her eyes gleaming with promise. "Grant me your favor," the king commanded, "and I shall build a reign of peace and power." The Morrigan laughed, a sound like crows in flight. "You ask for peace from the goddess of war? Foolish king. You may have my favor, but it will not bring peace, it will bring your end." And she prophesied before his court. "Your sons will betray you, your armies will turn upon themselves, and your crown will fall into the mud. Your name will be remembered, not for peace, but for ruin." The king dismissed her words, thinking himself stronger than fate. But in time, every part of her prophecy came true. His family torn apart, his crown lost, his bones left for crows to strip. Those who survived whispered that to seek the Morrigan's blessing was to invite one's own destruction. The Morrigan's prophecies were not always whispered in dark chambers, they were sung on the battlefield itself. She would stand upon a mound, cloaked in black, her hair wild in the wind, and chant words that cut deeper than blades. To one side, she promised glory, "Strike now, and your names will be sung until the last harp falls silent." To the other, she gave terror, "Run, and your children will never know your face, for you shall rot unburied in the fields." Her songs carried across the clash of swords, infecting hearts with madness, courage, or despair. Some warriors charged into certain death, smiling, because the Phantom Queen had promised them eternal renown. Others dropped their weapons and fled, clawing at their ears as her voice echoed inside their skulls. No war in Ireland was ever fought without her shadow falling over it. Unlike other gods, the Morrigan was not bound by loyalty to mortals. She did not care who ruled or who won. What she cared for was the endless cycle of war, the wheel of fate turning, blood feeding the soil. She wove her prophecies not to save or destroy, but to ensure that no one could escape the dance of death. Poets told that she was like a loom, her threads black and red. The red was blood, the black was shadow, and together they formed the fabric of every life she touched. Even when she promised victory, It was always twined with ruin. You will win, she might say, but your triumph will cost you the life of your beloved. Or, you will survive, but your people will be ashes behind you. In this, she was more feared than death itself, for death ended life, but the Morrigan's prophecies destroyed hope. And yet, she did not always laugh at her victims. There were times when, after a battle, she was heard singing a lament. A keening wail that rose over the corpses, a song that chilled even the crows to silence. And it was not compassion, for she felt none. It was inevitability, an acknowledgement of the endlessness of it all. The lament was a reminder: no victory lasts, no king endures, no warrior stands forever. The Morrigan song was the sound of history itself, always written in blood. By now, kings trembled at her name, warriors cursed her prophecies even as they feared them. Yet her work was not finished. For she had still greater battles to shape, still darker rivers to stir. And one war above all others would carry her shadow deeper into legend, the Táin Bó Cúailnge, the cattle raid of Cooley, where empires clashed and the Morrigan soared above rivers running red. The greatest of Ireland's wars was not over kingdoms, but over a single prize, a bull. Yet from that prize came ruin. This was the Táin Bó Cúailnge, the cattle raid of Cooley, a saga of betrayal, pride, and death. And like all such tales, the Morrigan was at its heart. Queen Medb of Connacht desired the brown bull of Cooley, a beast so magnificent it was said no other could rival it. To claim it, she raised a vast army and marched into Ulster. The men of Ulster, cursed by a spell, lay in weakness, unable to rise. Only one stood to defend them: Cuchulainn, the Hound of Ulster, the very warrior who had once spurned the Morrigan. It was here, in this war, that she saw her chance to weave her vengeance tighter. Before one of his great duels, Cuchulainn rested by a river. There the Morrigan appeared to him, not as a hag or crow, but as a maiden of unearthly beauty. "Great warrior," she said softly, "I have come again to offer you my love. Take me as your ally, and none shall stand against you." But Cuchulainn, stubborn as ever, shook his head. "I told you once, goddess, I need no love but my sword and my cause. I fight for Ulster, not for you." The Morrigan's smile faltered, her eyes darkening. "Then you fight against me." And just as before, she turned her gifts into curses. When Cuchulainn faced his enemies, the Morrigan struck at him once more in her shifting forms. First, as a red heifer, she charged into the fray, her hooves shaking the earth. Cuchulainn drove his spear into her side, wounding her. Next, as an eel, she coiled around his legs in the ford, seeking to drag him beneath the water. He crushed her with his heel, and she writhed away. Finally, as a wolf, she drove cattle into his path, seeking to overwhelm him. He struck her blind in one eye with a sling stone. Each time she was beaten, each time she was wounded. Yet even in defeat, she bound her fate to his. After the battles, when Cuchulainn, weary and bleeding, staggered from the field, he met an old woman sitting by the roadside. She offered him 3 drinks of milk. Grateful, he drank each in turn. And with every sip, she blessed him, "May your wounds heal as I drink." Only when the last blessing left her lips did Cuchulainn recognize her. The old woman was the Morrigan, the goddess he had wounded. By drinking, he had given her power over him, healing the very injuries he had inflicted. He spat in fury, but the deed was done. She had marked him again, binding their fates tighter with every encounter. The war of the cattle raid raged on, rivers running red with blood. The Morrigan took to the skies as a crow, shrieking over the carnage. Wherever she flew, madness followed. Warriors turned their swords on their own comrades. Cattle stampeded through armies, crushing hundreds under their hooves. The ground became so sodden with blood that streams overflowed, carrying corpses like driftwood. The poets tell that she stood on the riverbanks, her feet crimson, singing, "Rivers run red, the land drinks deep. Kings shall fall, queens shall weep. The crow is fed, the wheel turns still. Ireland bends to the phantom queen's will." Her prophecy came true. Though armies clashed and the bull was claimed, neither side could boast victory. Both were shattered, their champions broken, their fields choked with the dead. When the dust settled and silence fell, the Morrigan walked the battlefield once more. She moved among the corpses, her hands trailing through blood, her crows feasting on eyes and hearts. To her, it did not matter who had won or lost. The war itself was her triumph. For as long as blood flowed, as long as Ireland's soil drank the lifeblood of its people, the Phantom Queen was fed. And in the silence, her laughter carried across the plains, a sound like 1,000 wings beating in the night. The cattle raid ended, but Ireland's wars did not. The Morrigan's shadow stretched onward, each prophecy leading to another battle, another ruin. Yet the darkest of her prophecies was still to come, one that sang not of a single battle, but of Ireland's doom itself. The Morrigan had walked through Ireland's history like a shadow of iron and blood. She had stood with gods at Mag Twyard, haunted the steps of kings, and bound herself to the greatest of warriors. But her most chilling legacy was not in what she did, but in what she spoke, her final prophecy. For when the great battles of the Tuatha Dé Danann were done, and the Fomorians cast down, she rose above the field one last time. The plain was drenched in blood, the bodies of heroes and monsters alike strewn across the soil. Even victory felt like defeat. And there she began to speak, not to one king, not to one tribe, but to all of Ireland. Her words were carried by the wind, by the wings of her crows, by the whispering of rivers. "Darkness comes," she said, her voice echoing over the slain. "Though gods have triumphed, their days shall fade. Though kings rise, their crowns shall crumble. Though heroes fight, their blood shall stain the land until the end of days." She spoke of rivers turning to blood, of forests blackened with fire, of Ireland divided against itself in endless cycles of war. She saw no peace, only the wheel of violence, turning and turning, grinding bones into dust. "The land shall drink forever of the blood of its children," she cried, "and no man, no god, no empire shall end the hunger. War is eternal. Doom is eternal. And I, Phantom Queen, Crow of Battle, shall feast until the last cry of the last warrior fades into silence." Her voice was not a warning. It was a sentence. A truth carved into the marrow of the world. The poets tell that she then broke into song, a chant so haunting that even the dead seemed to stir. Her words were like thunder rolling across mountains, like the tearing of the sea against jagged cliffs. She sang of Ulster, torn by strife. She sang of Connacht, drowned in its own pride. She sang of Munster and Leinster, each in turn devoured by war. She sang of heroes undone, of kings murdered in their halls, of families shattered by the hunger for power. And as she sang, her crows lifted into the sky, circling the battlefield until the heavens themselves darkened with wings. The survivors dropped their weapons, some weeping, some howling in despair. They knew that what she sang was not possibility, it was certainty. But her prophecy did not end with men. She foresaw the fading of the Tuatha Dé Danann themselves. Though gods, they too would wane, replaced by new orders, new faiths, new rulers. Their names would sink into myth, their temples vanish, their power slip away like mist in the morning. Only she would remain. For while gods of harvest, sun, and craft could fade, war would never die. As long as blood was spilled, the Morrigan's wings would darken the sky. When her prophecy ended, silence fell. The wind stilled. The crows descended, pecking at the fallen. The warriors who yet lived dared not speak, for to speak would be to admit the truth of her vision. And then she was gone, vanishing like a shadow at dusk, her form dissolving into the black swarm of her birds. But her words lingered. They were remembered by druids, carried in song by poets, whispered by mothers to children as warnings. They were not promises of glory. They were reminders that every triumph would one day bleed into ruin. And so her legend endured, not as a goddess to be prayed to, but as a truth to be feared. The Phantom Queen had sung Ireland's doom, and Ireland would live it, again and again, in every war, every betrayal, every spilling of blood upon its green soil. Cu Chulainn had defied her. Kings had sought her blessing. Gods had fought under her shadow. But in the end, all bent to the same truth. No one escapes the Morrigan. Her last prophecy was not bound to the past. It was bound to eternity. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Faiths shifted, kingdoms divided, blood spilled anew. But always, in every shadow of war, in every omen before death, there was the Morrigan. Though her name slipped from prayers, though new gods and saints were lifted in her place, the people of Ireland never forgot her. For how could they? She lingered in every battlefield crow, in every washerwoman seen at a lonely ford, in every dream of blood-soaked armor. She had sung her prophecy, and Ireland had lived it. In the wars of kings and chieftains, the Morrigan was there. Warriors swore they saw her stalking the fields at dusk, or perching as a raven on the banners of doomed armies. In the uprisings and rebellions of later centuries, soldiers whispered of a dark woman crossing rivers at night, her cloak dripping with blood. To see her was to know you would not live until morning. Even in times of uneasy peace, her shadow clung to the land. Farmers crossing fields at twilight spoke of a crow that followed them too closely. Travelers told of a hag kneeling by the river, scrubbing garments red though no man had been slain nearby. And always, the lesson was the same: where the Morrigan appeared, death was close at hand. What made her terrifying was not just her presence, but her inevitability. The Morrigan was not evil. She was not good. She was truth. The truth that no matter the era, no matter the crown or flag, war would come, and death would follow. She was the scream of the battlefield, the keening over the dead, the whisper in the ear of a king who believes himself invincible. And she was patient. Unlike men and gods, she had no end. She did not need temples, nor sacrifices, nor worshippers. All she needed was the same thing the world has never lacked: blood. Some say she still walks Ireland. That in lonely places at dusk, you may glimpse a woman in black, her hair wild as storm clouds, her eyes like bottomless pools. Or perhaps just a crow, perched too close, watching too long, its cry sounding strangely like laughter. Others claim she wanders battlefields far beyond Ireland now, wherever men wage war, wherever blood is spilled. From ancient plains to modern trenches, from swords to gunfire, the Morrigan has never left. And perhaps, in every war-torn land, when the sky fills with carrion birds, it is not hunger that draws them, but her. Watching, waiting, feeding. The Morrigan is not a goddess to be adored, but to be acknowledged. She is the shadow that follows every crown, the echo of every battle cry, the cold certainty that death waits for all. She was there at the first wars of gods. She stood over the fall of heroes. She whispered doom into the ears of kings. And she will be there at the world's last battle, when the final river runs red. For war does not end. And as long as it does not, neither will she. The crows rise from the battlefield, blackening the sky. Their wings beat like war drums. Their cries echo like prophecy. And among them, unseen but always present, walks the Phantom Queen. The Morrigan, goddess of death, goddess of war, goddess of prophecy, the eternal omen of Ireland, and the reminder that no one escapes the shadow of fate. And so ends the tale of the Morrigan, the Phantom Queen of War. But remember, the next time you see a crow circling overhead, or hear the cry of a raven at dusk, ask yourself, is it only a bird? Or has the Phantom Queen come to watch? Which myth should I cover next? Subscribe for more myths that were never meant to be forgotten.